I'm often asked the question when I had my comic shop, or as my comic shop has been in operation, or when I open up my shop again here, hopefully soon, will I carry manga? And the answer is yes, but it's tough. I find that a lot of US Western comic shops have trouble carrying a healthy amount of manga compared to Western comics. So, why is that? Well, I'm going to try and explain from my perspective, and I'm really curious in the comments below, comments from other retailers and what they're seeing as well. Hey everybody, this is Perch. Yeah, there's weird battle lines that are starting to get drawn around manga, and I admit I'm not completely sure why. Other than anytime one group or one side gets really passionate about something, they really like something, it almost inspires another group to want to go at it. So manga is a good example where a lot of readers are saying, "Hey, I've given up on Western comics." I guess that is a negative thing, but I've given up and I've gone to manga. Now, what's curious about that is that in a lot of cases, when comic fans have complained about the direction of Western comics, the comment goes back to them saying, "Hey, maybe this stuff isn't for you, or if you don't like it, don't buy it." And so, in effect, the customers are going, "All right, advice taken. I've gone to manga," and then that seems to piss people off as well. And it's like, I mean, pick a lane here at some point. But it gets to manga with comic shops is weird because I've run across a lot of retailers who will say things like, "I won't." Yeah, just recently, I had the question, and then I had this interaction with another retailer. In this case, somebody who's really just across the water here in the Pacific Northwest, who said, "I don't carry manga. I don't want to attract that alt right crowd." And so here's where I can't process that. You ever get like a bit of data or something in your mind, and it just makes so little sense that your brain freezes up. It's how I felt reading Iron Man 2020. But there's this. I find it amazing that somehow manga has gotten kind of tucked into that part of the culture war. It's very, very weird. It makes no sense. None of that makes sense. Yet here we are. But if you're a comic shop, carrying manga isn't always simple. And it's not simple for a bunch of reasons. I mean, the biggest is that there's a lot of manga. If you're a comic shop and you're like, "I'm going to start carrying manga," where do you begin? And you may not understand the true size and scope of the problem unless you've actually gone to Japan and you visited one of the kind of the booksellers, or God, I'm forgetting, right in Shinjuku, right next to the train station. There's a giant store called Good Hands, and it's got there's a bookstore off to the right. It's and there's a giant. This bookstore I think has 4 or 5 floors, which is a relatively small building of its type in Tokyo. And there's like a floor with just manga. And when I say manga, I mean like there's tables. It's hard to kind of picture. I don't even know how to describe it to somebody. It's just picture like thousands of books. Picture your local library with way more books. And that's what an average floor of manga looks like in Japan. There's just so much. There's so much that it's probably a video for another day, but it is, we talk about the discoverability problem in current Western comics. So like how do you stand out when there's 100 and 200 comics on the shelves and Marvel's sending out like 80 things a month? How do you stand out? Well, I mean, I remember the first couple times I would go into the bookshops in Tokyo, and it's like I it is overwhelming. Your brain melts. You can't figure out where to go. There's books everywhere, and it is it's I mean it's insane. Somehow they manage to kind of struggle through it. It works. But that in the US, if you're going to carry manga, what you're probably going to be doing is you're going to be carrying very westernized manga, or marketed to the Western audience manga. You're going to be carrying things that everybody knows. Right now, you're going to have One Piece, you're going to have Naruto, you're going to have Dragon Ball Z. You're going to have My Hero Academia. You're going to have a lot of stuff like that. And, if you've got that upscale, refined audience, you'll put in some Lone Wolf and Cub and probably Ranma One Half and some of that stuff. I don't know. I'm not sure Ranma One Half qualifies for upscale exactly, but it's fun. Yeah, we'll go there. But at any rate, it's a difficult prospect to get into, and it's why if you go to a Barnes and Noble or you go to a bookseller like that, you see huge shelves of manga, and the manga is rapidly overtaking the graphic novel side of the world, the Western graphic novel side of the world. And if you play that out and you think about that same thing in a comic shop, if a comic shop really committed itself to being inclusive with lots and lots of manga, the manga would rapidly overwhelm the Western comics, like in no time. So, in a lot of cases, what comic shops have to do is that they have to create pipelines to Japan or to other places where they could get this manga and not necessarily carry it on the shelf, but carry enough of it so that their customers know they can get manga here, and they may have to wait for it because some of it has to be ordered. And hopefully that process isn't too terrible. I remember going over to Japan and taking like an extra 2 suitcases, like huge rolling suitcases, and then loading them up with basically as bulging with manga, and then carting them back as a way to kind of fulfill orders at times. And for a while I was going to Japan like once a month, and it was like every time there'd be the trip. And at some point the nice people at JAL got like, what the hell are you doing? When I'm trying to board the plane. but but anyway, a manga is. I think that there is a problem in the U.S. with how that stuff gets here and how it gets understood and consumed and how do people find it and where do they get their hands on it. It is a problem. I do think a lot of comic shops struggle with how to properly carry it and what to do with it. I think it's in a lot of cases comic shop owners also are just not kind of mentally equipped to kind of handle that complexity along with all the Western comic complexity. Kind of pick a lane. But it's becoming easier. I do think in the next 10 years or so, there will become some services to make it easier. What we need is not a distributor, but a aggregator for manga to allow it to come into comic shops and make it easier for people to order, make it easy for people to reorder than it is today. That service is clearly not coming from Diamond. And so it's got to come from somewhere. And I think there's a pretty large business opportunity because, again, people argue about manga as part of the larger cultural divide, which full stop is stupid. I think if you're there and I need to be more definitive. I do try and see both sides, and I always do. But I will say if you're standing on a hill trying to defend the point that manga equals white supremacy, you're a moron. Full period. That is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And I'm I have this is gonna make me feel kind of bad. So somebody asked me a legitimate question: that does CB Cebulski dictate that every Marvel comic book has to have somebody eating food in it? And the answer is no. That's funny, but no. And it's also funny how I'm talking about Japan and Spolsky's name comes up. Maybe we just need the Akira Yoshida of comic distributors to help us out with all this stuff. At any rate, I think manga is great. I think it's definitely growing in popularity. I think there's zero doubt that it's growing in popularity in the U.S. I think some people have wanted to deny that number, but sales figures do not lie, and it is a growing business. Manga as a business in Japan is still quite powerful. A lot of it has shifted over to digital, and like I've talked about in like what feels like a million videos, and I won't do it again now. Japan has figured out how to deal with digital in a way that the U.S. has not. And if the U.S. is smart, they will look quickly and rapidly at what Japan is doing and try and mimic it fast, because otherwise they're basically in the business of reinventing the wheel and failing. And so that's just something that should go on. At any rate, what about you? Do you collect manga? Does your comic shop collect manga? Do you recognize the problem here? What do you like to do? And are you on one side or the other of this bizarre cultural debate? Did I insult you by calling you a moron? I apologize for that, but it is pretty stupid. Anyway, like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications if you like to be bothered. Otherwise, and as always, most importantly, thanks for listening.